How's it going? All good?
Good, pretty good so far. How about you?
Come again, I couldn't hear you.
How about you? It's pretty good so far.
I'm good. I'm having my morning coffee because it's 9 a.m. here.
I see.
Yeah, but
All right.
it's a bit cloudy. Actually, I had to turn on the lights, so it's pretty
All
sweet.
right. All right. Mhm. Okay, we'll be starting.
Yeah,
Now?
whenever you're ready, we can start.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Kapin. I'm going to be host for today's workshop. Welcome to our film criticism workshop with Davide Abbatescianni. This workshop is held by Europe on Screen 2022 in partnership with EU Consortium and Cineuropa as part of Road to Europe on Screen 2022. You can enjoy the festival both offline and online. For offline screenings, you can watch our selected venues in Jakarta, Bandung, Denpasar, Medan, Surabaya, and Yogyakarta from the 16th until 26th of June 2022. And as for the online screenings through the website festivalscope.com from the 20th until 30th of June 2022. Not only film screenings, but there are also other events such as a question and answer session with European film practitioners during the festival in the Film Talks program. You can check the schedules and venues at our official Europe on Screen social media and website. For today's workshop, you will be mentored by Davide Abbatescianni. He currently works as foreign correspondent for the EU-funded magazine Cineuropa, where he regularly writes about European cinema. He is a member of film critics associations such as the International Federation of Film Critics, or FIPRESCI, the Federation of Film Critics of Europe and the Mediterranean, or FIDIORA, and the European Network for Cinema and Media Studies, or NEXT. In this workshop, Davide will share his insights on film criticism, especially in the social media era. Before we start, let's first welcome Europe on Screen 2022 Festival co-directors, Mbak Menina Putri Wismurti and Mas Naufal Yazid, to give some remarks.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. So thank you so much, Davide. Buongiorno, I think.
Buongiorno, thank you.
Yes, it's 9 a.m. there. So thank you so much for supporting Europe on Screen. And it's good to see you even on, before we had already met in Cannes, lively.
Supermarket.
Supermarket, and also maybe bump into each other during queuing films, I think. But it is good to see you here again, and thank you for supporting us on the Road to Europe on Screen 2022, especially on this workshop, sharing your knowledge for film critics and film reviews. And I've understand that you have already also talked with Naufal last Tuesday. That was really cool insights that we get. So we are so happy to welcome also everyone. I hope that all of you can learn a lot from Davide. And if you want to ask anything, as Kevin already also saying that if you want to ask even in Bahasa Indonesia, please do so. We will help to translate them. And also please remember that the festival will start next Thursday on the 16th of June. I hope that all of you here, I'm inviting all of you to come because everything in the festival are free of charge. And yes, Davide, and I'm looking forward for your workshop, and I will leave the floor now to Naufal. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Putri. Buongiorno, Davide. Nice to see you again. And welcome to everyone in this workshop. There is one point that I remember from our conversation with Davide during our Instagram live session. He mentioned that a good writing applies to all kind of writing, including film reviews. So I hope that by sharing the experience that Davide has had, sharing his knowledge, you can apply all the learning either today or tomorrow or both in your writing of any kind. So I hope everyone can make a very good use of this opportunity. And as Putri said, if you are not comfortable using English, silakan menulis pertanyaan dalam bahasa Indonesia. We will help translate to Davide. So have a good time. I'm sure Davide can make this very fun workshop. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mbak Bonina Putri and Mas Naufal. I would like to invite our festival directors, Mas Naufal and Mbak Putri, our mentor for this workshop, Davide, and all the participants to please turn on the camera for the photo session. Let's give some time for everyone to turn on their camera. All right, let's show the best pose and smile, and please look at the camera. I will count to 3. All right, I can see that some are still trying to turn on the camera. All right, are we ready? Okay. I will count to 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, once again. 1, 2, 3. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. Now let's get started with the workshop. Davide, the screen is yours.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, hello, everyone. Good morning from Rome. I'm going to introduce myself briefly just to speak about the work I've done and how I ended up doing film criticism and film journalism as my main jobs. And then we'll start from some very basic / theoretical foundations to understand what's this job about, what are the differences between film journalism and film criticism, the main players in terms of festivals and publications, or at least the players I'm used to work with, because we'll speak about it. We're talking about a very broad universe when it comes to film writing or film-related writing. And yeah, and then we'll go ahead with something else. Obviously, I wanted to be as more interactive as possible. So I probably will stop rather often asking whether you have any questions or whether all the concepts in place are clear, or if you want to go through some more aspects, because obviously we're talking about such a big discipline which involves so many aspects. So maybe with this group, there is at some point it emerges a specific need to cover certain aspects instead of others. But anyway, we'll start very broad, very general, as easy as possible, and then we can delve into more details. All right, so about myself, basically I started working as a journalist in 2017. But my background is quite different, actually, because the first thing I did after finishing high school was to study theater directing and communication studies at the same time. So I was taking kind of 2 bachelors. And after completing these 2 study paths, I moved to Tallinn to study documentary film. So I learned how to be a filmmaker myself, particularly non-fiction filmmaker. And after that, I had the intention to start a PhD in film, because I developed the dream, let's say, to become a film academic. So I moved to Ireland, I started this PhD, but at the same time, one day I contacted Cineuropa, which is the main outlet I work for, and I asked them to do some kind of internship or to collaborate with them to some extent. And what happened was that the director was, let's say, interested about the fact I was moving to Ireland, because they had no one writing Irish news there. And I started writing some pieces for them, like trial pieces. Now, it went pretty well, and then gradually the work with them expanded. I found other publications to work for. So from 2017 until 2020, that was kind of my side job. So it was bringing me some income, but it wasn't my only job. Then in 2020, I managed to switch full-time to this job. And I started working for other publications even more regularly, and covering festivals. So in a way, you'll get also the perspective of someone. I wouldn't say I'm not a newcomer to the industry, but still I'm young. I've been about 5 years in this business, and I can provide you with fresh insights, but also bear in mind that obviously I don't have the experience of a veteran who's been doing film criticism for 30, 40 years. But at the same time, probably it's interesting for you to see how to get started and to understand whether it is possible to do this job for a living. And it is very hard, but it is. That's the good news. All right. So that's in a nutshell. Speaking about Cineuropa, the publication I work for is basically published into 4 languages on a daily basis: English, French, Italian, and Spanish. We cover the business of European film, including European co-productions. So anything that has small, slight European angle, in terms obviously of film and TV production, is something we could cover, or we would be interested to look at least. And we are about 50 people working for the publication, including staff writers such as me, correspondents, and other collaborators who do other jobs like accountancy, technical aspects, and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, that's basically the let's say, main overview of what I do. Cineuropa, in terms of, let's say, editorial policy and in terms of its style, is very much similar to other big trades that are in the field, with some exceptions, obviously, some different aspects. But what we do is basically trade journalism. So our readership are mostly filmmakers, producers, industry people, in a way. So in this sense, we're not so different from the likes of Screen International, Variety, Deadline, The Hollywood Reporter. So these are publications that mostly talk to that type of spectatorship. Obviously, we do have lots of film lovers or film enthusiasts that access our website, for instance, to read reviews, or because they're interested in reading a specific interview with a director, or that sort of things, or even to access the database we have. But at the same time, that's the core target we focus on. So yeah, basically that's the type of publication I work for. But obviously, as I was mentioning in the very beginning, trade journalism, trade publications are just a fraction of the places where you could do some film writing, because there are plenty of other types of publication you could work for. Some are film-related publication, some others are not film-related publication, but they do look for film-related writing or culture-related contents. So this wide spectrum includes publications that are very strong on film criticism, like, I don't know, the likes of the Movie Notebook, Sight and Sound, or Little White Lies. I'm obviously focusing mostly on the English-speaking publications because that's the language I work in, but every country more or less has at least a few outlets following this type of models. And then you can find obviously the dailies or other magazines that publish regular news coverage, but have a focus or a set of pages dedicated to culture and film. For instance, myself, I freelance for other outlets such as the New Arab and New Scientist. The New Arab is a daily online magazine, and it covers the Middle East in general and the North African region. So you'll find plenty of geopolitical analysis or news about the conflicts ongoing in the territory. But there's also a section dedicated to culture, and there I'm one of the film reviewers. So it's a place that it's not supposed to, let's say, cover so much film, but still there is space to do some film writing. The same goes for New Scientist, which is a magazine, a bit of a highbrow magazine, if I may say so, that talks about science facts like the environmental crisis or the most common diseases or the latest discoveries in the field of biotech. But with this angle, they do have a page focusing on culture and film where, for instance, people like me or some other colleagues cover documentaries or science fiction films. So anything that has at least a loose connection with scientific topics. So these are some of the options, but other places where one could explore or get in touch with to do some film writing are even the most unexpected ones. There are lots of luxury brands, for instance, and they pay well, looking for film-related content, or the in-flight magazines. You might be on a plane, I don't know, let's say a plane from Amsterdam to Tallinn. So the company was Air Baltic. This is direct experience of what I'm talking about. You open their magazine and they have one huge interview with Claire Denis, who's a very famous director. So as you can see, the landscape is broad, and the digital age we live in, to some extent, increase the opportunities, but obviously it's more difficult to find them and to, how to say, regulate your own search because you're overloaded with information. So that's the main downside. At the same time, if someone keeps on looking, he, she, or they can find something, some interesting places where to publish their stuff, basically. About this, I wanted to ask you: is everything clear so far, or do you have any specific questions about the few things I touched upon? At some point, I take silence as golden. That's it.
All right. Maybe if there's any questions. Okay. And there's no questions. So.
Oh, sounds good. Sounds good. All right. So now I ask you a question, and whoever feels ready to answer would be great. One thing is forbidden during this course, being shy, but not because I want to torture you, but because if you want to do this job, you need to be ready to answer. And you can be wrong, you can say wrong things or mistakes. It's part of the learning process, first. Second, some things are not even about being right or wrong, especially when it comes to film criticism. It's very subjective. We're talking about art, so we're not talking about something we can measure like kilos, pounds, or something like that. So don't hesitate. And the first question I want to ask you here is, what is the difference for you between film criticism and film journalism? So if anyone feels ready to answer or wants to share their take, feel free to take the stage.
I would like to answer that.
Right.
So I think there is definitely an overlap between the two. I think as a film journalist, you can actually make coverage for example, the premiere of a film, or you go to a film festival and then you get access to films that you can actually review. But film critics can actually go even deeper than just doing a coverage. They can actually do some kind of analysis. Like, for example, I saw that the winners of the Indonesian verse of Oscar last year were film critics that actually dig even deeper towards the academic side of like they're trying to like theorize theorization.
Yeah, terrorizing is fine anyway.
Yeah, terrorizing the not terrorizing, but theorizing
no, for God's sake.
the materials behind the context of a film or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, there are some correct things you said in there, basically because most of what you said applies to, I would say, the most mainstream publications. But when someone works in film journalism, it doesn't mean the reporting or the analysis can't be deeper. But yeah, the tendency is if you look at the more mainstream publications, journalism is more of a I would say more of something you could consume, let's say, something that is not set in stone or set to remain there and as a newsworthy value for a few days or a few minutes in some cases, especially when you start writing something that is closer to celebrity news than the craft of film. But at the same time, yeah, film criticism is more analytic and tends to be deeper. But in terms of content, the very basic distinction is that film criticism is about essays and reviews, and film journalism is about other forms of reporting, which does not exclude, though, analytical / critical pieces. An op-ed about film topics is a good example of film journalism, but it can be filled with interesting ideas and insights. So there are some trades that actually make a strong distinction between these two jobs. For instance, if you one day you would work for Variety, you cannot be a film critic and a film journalist. You need to make a choice. While other trades like Cineuropa, we are more flexible. There are some of us that do just one of them because maybe they feel comfortable with that or they want to focus on that aspect. And some others like me who actually do both. So if we speak about a very concrete aspect, if you manage to learn how to do both, it's very good because it brings you more money. You have more pitches to send to your editor. You can find many more places where to write. So it's anyway positive. Then obviously film is such a broad matter, so you need to start specializing or understanding what you're more comfortable working with. And if you want to explore territories that are more uncomfortable, you need to be aware that it's a challenge. Feel free to take it, but obviously it will take time to adjust. For instance, if someone tomorrow would ask me to write an essay about Latin American cinema, I can say I would be in huge troubles because, yeah, I do watch some Latin American movies or I know some masterpieces of the past, but I don't feel ready or skilled enough to write an entire essay about them. I would need some time to do research and it would be no easy task. While if you would ask me the same thing to, like it happened a couple of months ago, I did it for an Italian magazine, to write an essay about contemporary Lithuanian cinema, since I'm very familiar with the Baltic scene. It comes way easier. It's a way easier task. Yeah, so that's the main distinction. It's also about the type of writing. But obviously, even when we review something, the depth and the style, the writing style we have, the editorial guidelines we need to comply with are different from publications to publications. If you write a review for a daily, the editor won't demand you the same things that an editor from a trade publication would demand, would look at. So at some point, it's important to know that you need to work on your own voice to make it emerge. But at the same time, especially if you write for many publications, it becomes also an activity where you need to find a compromise. You need also to understand what the publication needs, what they want, which doesn't mean changing your opinion because these would be bad editors. You shouldn't work with these. But at the same time, you need to remember that the editors, the publishers you work with, they're also your customers. So they're saying they're paying you for that. So let's say that your focus should be on writing your own stuff as clearly as possible, but also in line with the readership this publication has. For instance, when you write for publications like New Scientist or others that are science focused, you can take for granted some scientific ideas that most of the mainstream audience doesn't know about. At the same time, when you write for a trade like Cineuropa or Screen, you can take for granted some ideas, some concepts that are very clear and known within the film industry, but that wouldn't be so familiar for a mainstream audience. So it's really important to do this. Obviously, one thing that helps is to have good editors who provide you with honest, clear feedback. But at the same time, it's very useful when a publication you work for shares their editorial guidelines or their, let's say, style guides. Basically, some of these include very concrete aspects, like, I don't know, don't capitalize this letter, or split the article in 3 paragraphs, 4 paragraphs. And some other rules actually are more about the content you should focus on, or the angle, or you should give to. This is very, how to say, this mostly applies to news, but to some extent also to film reviews. So one thing that it's important in any case, and that you should do always, is to read a lot. And by reading a lot, I don't mean only the other papers, but as I was mentioning in the Instagram live a couple of days ago, it's really, really important to get curious about things. So it's important to know the history of film, the craft of filmmaking, to watch films, but at the same time, it's important to have a direct, strong contact with what real life is. If you start writing a review about, I don't know, a film of Ken Loach, and you don't know what are the struggles of the common man, how much 1 liter of milk costs, or other very basic things, you're not going to write a good review, most probably. Or anyway, this shortcoming might affect negatively what you're writing. So get curious as much as you can. Obviously, no one can know anything, but still, if you're driven by curiosity, this will somehow be reflected through your writing. So it's about curiosity, but also about your background. For instance, maybe some of you have studied or are studying something that has nothing to do with cinema. I don't know. Maybe you were attending a vet school, or you're a pilot, or maybe you studied law. And I can say, that's great, that's wonderful. It's something that can emerge through your writing at some point, because first, there are some films tackling these aspects. And second, it makes you unique. What helps me personally, but obviously it can help anyone in perspective, to make my writing less banal, let's say, or at least to find a clear viewpoint for what I'm going to write, is my background. I used to study theater, so for me, it becomes extremely important to look at the actor's work and the director's work, but at the same time, look at all the aspects that have some connections with theater. So the mise en scène, or the acting styles. These are all things that I know because I've been doing that directly. At the same time, I'm a person who's really interested in European politics and video games. So even these passions that I have in my spare time can positively affect my writing. So embrace your passions, find new ones, and even read or get curious about something unusual. If you don't know something about dolphins, and you're curious about that, go and buy a book about dolphins. That is really, really helpful. Obviously, it's something you should never stop doing because your writing, your work, your life needs to have interesting stimuli to go ahead. So that's definitely a stronger recommendation I can give. Then obviously, knowing the history of film is important and very useful because then you end up avoiding certain mistakes, but also you end up being aware of what you see on screen. Let's say in a better way, because the point is, if you watch a movie made today and you think it's revolutionary, but you don't know that, for instance, just an example, Buñuel or Louis Malle were doing these things 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago, you know, your viewpoint is a bit limited. Again, no one can know anything. It's still a process and it takes time. But starting it, reading a couple of good books, having some solid foundations to work on is very, very helpful, and it makes things easier. Now, open question to understand, let's say your focus and especially your interests. So I know we are quite many here, but maybe at least a few of you can answer on this. I wanted to ask you if some of you can tell me, like in really 2 words, what's your background and interest, but also what are the aspects you would focus on when writing a review. So if anyone wants to answer on this, probably if you're very quick, even everyone could answer on this. And actually, I'm curious to hear your takes. Anyone? Okay, someone already wrote story and techniques. Yeah, you can even type it in the chat.
Hello, David.
Hi, Vincent.
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Actually,
The sound
I think
started.
yeah.
about
I think
movie
Vincent's
that
internet
I
is
like. For example, like there's a tiny bit part
Yeah, it's quite unstable. Look,
maybe Vincent can chat.
you can use the chat. Yeah, you can use the chat and you can comment on the answers. Yeah, Vincent, you can write your answer in the chat. Then later maybe we can try again and see if your connection works. Okay, so Panji, sorry, but maybe I mispronounced your name, and feel free to correct me. Wrote my background are in film and literature, and I tend to focus on the politics of the film. Okay, interesting aspect. Perianto, I focus on the positive points of the movies. Good, but not so good. I mean, I'm going to explain myself. It's good to have a positive attitude towards what you're watching. There are some terrible critics that enjoy bashing them regardless, and I know a bunch of them. So it's important to always always be respectful and know that there was a lot of work behind the making of a movie, especially the feature-length ones. So having this in mind is important. On the other hand, your job is also to highlight, I wouldn't say what's wrong, but the complexity of the film and its aspects. And in most of the cases, some things are, it's very banal to say, done better or more effectively than others. At least for you as a viewer, and that's your experience you're talking about. You're not talking on behalf of the whole universe when you write the article. So it's good to stay positive and be positive about what people have done, but at the same time, you should keep in mind that highlighting shortcomings or things that could have done differently is part of the work. So Julius wrote, I'm a film and television student. I focus on cinematography and screenplay, which makes total sense. Same goes for Trian, cinematography and story. Dorivana, hi David, nice to meet you virtually. My background in philosophy and cultural studies focused on humanity and social issues. All right, yeah. It's good. That's you basically already have 5-10% of the work done, because if you're entirely aware of what's your background and what you're interested in looking for when it comes to watch and review a film, you already have a small angle to work with. Diane wrote novelist, academic, and activist. I like your background. Okay. So yeah, if you would like, you can also answer on the aspects you'd like to focus. Ideally, if you would write a review or when you just watch a film. So there are many aspects you can actually focus on, but the point is you have a word count, so you need to choose. And it's good that some of you wrote 2-3 aspects, because most probably, especially when you have a short format, you don't have the space and the time to explore everything in depth, especially because what we'll be focusing here is film reviewing for trades or for, let's say, more mainstream publications. Obviously, if you're writing an academic essay and you have 5,000, 10,000, a book to write about, that's totally different type of analysis. But bear in mind that the type of, let's call it literary genre we're talking about today, requires you, how to say, a good level of reactivity. You don't have so much time to write a piece. Sometimes you need to file it in a few hours or on the same day. Sometimes maybe you have 24, 48, 72 hours if you're lucky. And this requires you 2 things mostly. First of all, you need to find a sort of structure to work with, which on the one hand, it may seem a bit limiting, but on the other, forgive my French, pardon my French, it saves your ass. And at the same time, how to say, you need to do 3 things with your review. You need to say what one should expect to watch, more or less, obviously in broad words, but still. You should say whether this movie is worth watching or not, or at least give a clear statement of your take on the film. And then obviously distinguish the different aspects, because film is a complex creature. So there are lots of films that have 2, 3, 4 outstanding aspects, and then let's say 1, 2, 3, 4 that are totally awful, or anyway not at the same level of the first 4 I mentioned. So if you do these things, if you keep in mind these things, it helps. So structure, it's something you should create for yourself. What do I mean? I mean that you should basically write a small list, like bullet points, for yourself, of aspects you must cover on your film. This structure, these bullet points, can also become, let's say, a sketch outline of the paragraphs you're going to write. So, for instance, what I do personally, when I just want to stick to the task and I want to get the task done, and I don't have so much time to be super creative, and I need to file in the review and do my job, is this. Basically, in the first paragraph, I just spent some time at introducing the movie. So most of the cases I mentioned where it was screened, so 2, 3, 4 lines about the plot, because at least we need to understand what's the topic. And some main credits, obviously, I need to mention who's the director and if relevant, some production details. But again, we're talking about probably 100, 150 words, not more. So it's really introductory. Once we have done this introduction, then let's say I'm talking about a 400 or 500 words review, so a very short format. I need to sit and choose, in this film I just watched, what were the most prominent aspects? And again, this what I'm talking about is the working method I use. It can be useful to you, but it might not work. If you look at a movie like Dune, for instance, by Denis Villeneuve, you cannot speak about the visual aspects, or the cinematography, or the set design. It's so visual, at least for me, as a film, that I need to spend a few words on that. Then it's based on a complex system of characters. It has a grandiose narrative, and I'm not saying I liked it, but still, it has that type of style and atmosphere. So I need to focus also on the narration. Next question, is this based on a book, on a novel, or something, a movie? Obviously, in the case specific case we're talking about, yes. Did I read the novel? In my case, yes, I read it. So I can also make some comparisons between the film and the book. So let's say, first introductory paragraph, 100, 150 words about contextualizing the movie, some production details, the screening venue, and its plot. Then we get straight to the core, focusing on, let's say, max 3 aspects, because you have 400 or 500 words. They're not so many. They look like there are many words, but they're not. So you can choose, in the case of Dune, for instance, acting, cinematography / set design, and narrative. And then one last paragraph will answer the question I mentioned in the beginning. Is this movie worth watching? What a viewer should expect from watching this film? I tend to put a last paragraph where, in a very simple way, a straightforward way, I say, all in all, or on the whole, overall, I believe that this movie is blah, 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 and you should watch it because blah, 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 or you shouldn't watch it, blah, 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 or this may be liked by people who are looking for this type of film instead of this other type of film. I'm obviously simplifying a lot, but if you go to the core of things, it's basically about that. What I suggest in terms of writing, now I said I believe, but don't put yourself, don't make yourself too present inside your writing. I know it's a very theoretical suggestion, but I'll try to explain it a bit better. There are lots of writers that have great personality, but at some point their personality is so overwhelming that you basically enjoy maybe reading what they write, but you tend to forget about what they're writing, or they fill the reviews with their personal anecdotes or some insights from the screening or other things. And that's personally a type of writing I don't like. But again, we're not talking about the science. If you find yourself comfortable in that type of things, or maybe your publisher wants that type of voice, go for it. Absolutely. So for instance, in my reviews, I never write the word I. I don't say I think, I believe. I use more of an impersonal tone, even though obviously it's my opinion. It's been written by Davide Abbatescianni, but not by someone else. But I use a more informal, more impersonal style. That's what I mean. And this helps because it creates a bit of distance also. How to say, to some extent, it helps you to make statements clearer and drier. One thing I recommend, especially if you write in English, but even in some other languages, but especially in English, I would say, don't write too long sentences. First, because they distract the reader. Second, they might be trickier to interpret. And the third, these people are reading a review. They don't want to spend the whole day trying to analyze what's in your head. Again, they want to know, what's this movie about? What am I going to watch? Will I like it maybe? That's it. It's as simple as that. Then we can have very noble speeches about this craft and this profession, whatever. But at the end of the day, that's what they look for. Even in a trade publication, most of them are producers. How much time do you think a producer has to read the trades every day? Some have 20 minutes, some have 10, some have 5, some have 1. So they literally scroll 1, 2, 3 articles, and we need to try to keep them hooked with simple, clear, straight statements in a way. So that's very important. Make your writing dry if you can. But again, this is not an absolute rule. There are some publications and some journalists that are very talented and they look for a more baroque style. So it's not so strict. I would say that in general, simplifying things, the main advantage is that it helps you when you don't have time and when you're in trouble. If you stick to this 3-point rule, so introductory paragraph, 2-3 aspects where I delve into and I say what's wrong and what's not, and a final judgment, let's say, on the film, you bring it home always. Somehow this cage helps you to stick to the task and go ahead. Obviously, when you have more time or when you feel particularly inspired, the great thing is that you can break this cage. It doesn't mean that all my pieces are structured that way, indeed. Many are, but not always. The fact that I know that cage, that I know that rule, I know that law, it means I know how to break it as well. Especially when you have more time or when you feel inspired or when maybe a movie is so strong, either positively or negatively, and pushes you to change the structure. So some of my reviews start, for instance, with a quote from a book, or maybe they start with one of the lines of the characters, or maybe they start with a geopolitical introduction, because maybe it's a documentary about famine in Africa. I remember another piece of writing I read about the topic, and I start by touching upon a couple of figures, and then I delve into the film. So you can obviously change. It's a bit like a musician in a way. You know your notes, you can play that, but if you know exactly how the melody is built, you can also improvise on it. You can improvise in this cage. And that's a very nice and creative aspect of our work. And especially when you are able to experiment within this cage. First, your writing can improve. Second, you can have more fun. Third, you can discover new things about your style. What I write now is not the same of what I used to write 5 years ago. And I'm pretty sure in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, my style will change again and again. Because first, I'll be more experienced. And second, coming back to curiosity, in 10 years, I'll be nourished with so many new books, new films, new events, new people I've met, which makes it quite unlikely that everything will stay the same. I mean, I started writing when I was basically a university student. Now I live in a different country. I'm a married man. I've traveled a lot. I'm not the same person I was 5, 10 years ago, at least to some extent. So that's probably, in a way, the subtle manner in which you can let your personality emerge. But at the same time, the film remains central. We need to talk about the film. People want to hear about the film. They don't want to hear about you having a chat with a lawyer at a bar and that reminded you of a scene that you saw in that blah, blah, blah. No, they want to know, again, what's in this film? What should I expect to watch? Will I like it or maybe I won't? So before moving ahead, any questions, fights, or things you want to add? I guess it's all clear, or anyway, you don't have any questions, right? Okay, perfect. Okay, so just a moment. Let me see. So what we could do, I would suggest to do so that we take a small break, like just for a coffee or cigarette or whatever. Wait, there is a question. We'll answer this question first. So Noor asks, are there any movies that are not relevant to be criticized and only meant as merely an entertainment, such as movies that are targeted for teenagers with storylines that don't make sense? It's quite a good question. Well, I'll mention this concept at first, and then I can answer. Criticism comes from the word criticism as an ancient Greek root, and it comes from a verb krino, which means to split, to divide, to dissect, to analyze. It's very banal to say, but we could analyze, dissect anything, even the most stupid film, even forgive me, the Twilight Saga, or all this kind of things. We can analyze them for sure. And then obviously we could speak about the level of depth and professionalism in that analysis. But anyone can be a critic in a way that is analyzing or dissecting some aspects about a film or another piece, another form of art. But you're asking whether they are relevant to be criticized. Well, obviously, they are meant for entertainment, so they have a different target audience, different purposes. So here you could follow two lines of thought. You can either review them for the target audience that they are supposed to intercept, or you can really ignore them. The point is, how to say, if you start reviewing these type of films, you can still distinguish them in a way. There are certain entertainment flicks that, even though they're just for the sake of entertainment, they are well written, they have solid character development. Obviously, there is this suspension of disbelief that plays a stronger role in this type of films than in others. Obviously, in a documentary, there's no suspension of disbelief because it's all supposed to be true. The same goes for a neorealist film. I mean, they try to follow the natural flow of things. They try to be realistic in a way. But obviously, when it comes to Avengers, Jurassic Park, Twilight, or whatever, we're talking about pure fiction, fantasy works. So I don't think they shouldn't be criticized or reviewed. Obviously, they appeal to a certain audience only, which can be huge, like in the case of superhero flicks. We're talking the likes of billions. So bashing them for the sake of bashing them, I don't know how much sense it makes. It's kind of useless. But again, I'm not fond of superhero movies, but I see that they are different between each other in terms of quality. Not lately, because they become more and more similar because of streaming players, but that's a longer speech. But I mean, Joker with Joaquin Phoenix, it's not even a typical superhero film, is not the same of the Zack Snyder's cut. I mean, if we speak specifically, there are huge differences, but they are in the same genre, more or less. They could be put in the same pot. The first one, Venice Film Festival, indeed. The other one, it has its own group of fans or whatever, but it's a totally different product. So I think it's still important to talk about them. What I don't like personally, but again, it's my perception, is that at some point they become too overwhelming in the film debate, and there are lots of great films or different films that tend to be ignored because and this is even publications' fault, they start talking and publishing massively about these films. So the point is, these films are already strong. They have already super marketing campaign. They don't need even more coverage. They will keep on gaining money, revenues, as they are already. But obviously, we live in a clickbait age, so publishers want to jump on a wealthy boat, gain more revenue through ads. Again, that's a long speech. So to summarize, yes, they can be criticized. Obviously, we need to be aware that they are pieces made for pure entertainment. We can still try to make distinctions in between the quality of these, but at the same time, I think we need less superhero films to be reviewed and more of some other films to be covered. I hope I answered somehow your question, Noor. It's quite big, broad, and I see already someone replying to the debate, which is good.
Who do you want to reply to?
What was this? Sorry, I think the tablet detected my voice and believed that I was talking to it. Sorry about that. So Gorivanov wrote, Davide, what do you think about political correctness or political representation in film? I see that the current debate tend to see if a film is ideal enough. How this ethic tendency then relate to aesthetics, cinematography value? Now the big question, I'll answer to that. And may I add something? I feel like just because something is only meant for entertainment doesn't mean it doesn't have any cultural impact. That's absolutely correct. Indeed, it has. Huge one. Twilight Saga mentioned before, change the fantasy genre of films, and I think that's something that can be analyzed. No, indeed. When I use my skeptical tone of voice, it's because of my personal taste. There I was really talking more as a viewer. I don't like it, but it doesn't mean I don't find it worth of analysis. I mean, the point is, there are so many cultural products, and many of these are the lowbrow ones that are actually shaping our life, our consumption habits. They create social phenomena around them, so they're extremely important in this sense. Now, what I was just saying is that I believe in the broader landscape of film publications, I think there are so many good films or different ones that tend to be ignored or they're not so well covered, and this more of flicks aimed to masses, including but not only superhero films. They become overly present, and they basically leave some space to some other films. But again, first, it's a personal opinion. Second, we still need to cover these, obviously. Again, I wouldn't tell you to be curious otherwise, because if you go out, you speak to a person who's 13, 12, 11, most probably one of their favorite film is, I don't know, Avengers or Loki or whatever. I mean, they are more interested in this type of thing. If you ignore that there is this interest in the world outside of your place, outside of your niche, outside of your bubble, you're doing something wrong already. Then obviously doesn't mean you need to like these things or you need to embrace them. You need to know them, and then you form your own ideas. That's really crucial. About political correctness and political representation in film, it's a huge question, but I can touch upon a few ideas. The first thing is that it's definitely true that many categories are underrepresented in terms of depictions on screens, on screen, but also in terms of the manpower. I don't know, banally, there are not so many disabled costume designers, for instance, or directors, and that goes for minorities or members of the LGBTQ community. So that's undeniable. There was a panel in Cannes in May. I was there. It was organized by the Swedish Film Institute, and at some point, one of the ladies there stood up and she said something clever, I believe. Many people were talking about during this panel the figures, how women are underrepresented, but she stood up and she said, but how many data do we need to collect still to realize that women have some troubles in this industry? So definitely it's something important that we should focus on. Then about, I mean, then guaranteeing representativeness, or let's call it this political correctness, is important, but at the same time, you shouldn't destroy works of art. So obviously there are some cases in which things look very forced, and they definitely don't come from a genuine interest of the creators to be inclusive, but they just do it because their editorial policy suggests them to do so, or maybe their marketing office says, oh, look, we should focus on this minority to intercept this type of audience or whatever. And that's not so nice, I believe. Sorry, I got the other. I'll reply also to that. So again, things should be balanced. Artistic creation should be independent, obviously. So a story should work because it works, and there are no set rules. But again, it's good that at least at industry level, there is more debate, more sensitiveness about these topics. Honestly, as a viewer and as a critic, I can say that I happen to watch some things that are 20, 30 years old, 40 years old, and some of them are really embarrassing. Maybe they still kept some qualities inside, but I feel discomfort in watching characters that are how to say, very offensive. Again, it doesn't mean you shouldn't depict a racist as a racist, for instance, if the character is racist, for God's sake. But again, it's really complicated. As much as the artistic creation is done with honest, straightforward ideas, more or less everything is legit. And then, as I said, inside the industry and on screen, we definitely need more characters. Also because we need more diversified stories. We can't keep on watching. I can even speak about Italian cinema. I know it very well since I'm Italian. I live here. I'm honestly fed up of watching the stories about people who are 40s. They are divorcing. The kids are teens who don't care about anything. And then somehow these two people split, but then they come back together. I prefer to see the story of an Indian living in Rome, for instance, or something else. That's why diversity comes in a right way, but also in a useful way, because if we keep on telling the same stories, this industry gets boring. So again, it really depends. I think the push and intention is right. It's not always pursued honestly or adequately, I believe. But yeah, but the intention, the goal is totally commendable in general. Go ahead with the questions. Obviously, we can talk more about these topics. So as I see the new messages here. So if you feel free indeed to disagree or intervene, I'm actually enjoying it, and that's what this workshop is also supposed to do. Okay, may I add something? I feel just like because something is on, no, this one, I read it already, I answered. You previously suggested the writers write whether the movie is worth watching or not. Is it possible to be ambivalent about a movie? Yes, absolutely, it is. It is. Actually, it's very frequent, if I may say so, because the tendency of new criticism, or especially, let's call it online criticism, but basically people who tweet random things, either critics or non-critics, they tend to shrink their judgment in 180 characters. In 180 characters, what kind of analysis can you give them? Most of the time, you see people yelling, masterpiece, total crap. This is the judgment they give. And the reality is that the truth lies in the middle. So most of the movies I watch are mediocre. They're not bad, but they're not even outstanding. They are mediocre or average at best. So there, if you want to give us a judgment about whether the movie is worth watching or not, you can also split it. Like it happens quite sometimes that I watched some horror films that I really didn't like them. I find them really predictable. But at the same time, I know that certain characteristics, certain ways that the director had to homage other genres or other films of the past was something super appealing, super crazy that people loved. And indeed, in my, let's say, final statement, I was mentioning the idea that this film might not be the right fit for someone who expects to watch this type of film, but might be really enjoyable for. So yeah, it can be ambivalent. And at the same time, especially when you don't have so much time and the work is quite complex or very philosophical, it happens with some films, give yourself some space for doubt. It's not forbidden. I happen to write some reviews where I was towards the end, I wouldn't say stating my uncertainty, but talking about the complexity of the work and how this can be interpreted differently and how the reading of this work could change after a new watching or maybe through time. It happens that some movies are even good, but they're just released on the wrong timing. So maybe it's too early or maybe it's too late. I happen to watch some films that are great for 2000, 2005. I mean, but they're not bad, but they're just a bit old-fashioned in a way, or they speak about topics that are not so timely anymore, let's say. So yeah, no, you can be ambivalent. As much as you build an argument behind that ambivalence, it's perfect. You're doing your job, so absolutely. Ambivalence, if explained and well supported, is welcome, for sure. Juvena said, I beg to differ. Panji Twilight Saga is hardly revolutionary. It's not even close to Harry Potter, and even the latter is still inferior to Lord of the Rings. Well, if we start speaking about the quality of the different sagas and things, we should start another workshop. So what I was definitely agreeing with Panji was that anyway, these big productions, these big projects have anyway a huge impact, even in terms of the businesses and the commercial aspect of things. So about that, we can't deny that Twilight is a big commercial success. It was at the time, at least. Yeah, obviously then I have a few where I can say what I like more. Obviously I'm more fan, but it's me, of Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings than Twilight. But again, they are all, for their largeness, very great examples where you can analyze the impact of a film, of a production on society or consumption. Then obviously, if we talk about the aesthetics, things could change. But again, even here, what you're doing is already film criticism somehow. You're already creating your own argument and trying to back them up with thesis. So, for instance, if this chat would become a piece of criticism, I would immediately ask Juven and Panji to say, why do you think Twilight Saga is arguably revolutionary, and why do you think it is actually revolutionary? And probably would come up with some answers and with some ideas. You would probably start speaking about cinematography or the narrative structure, whatever you like. But that's the core of criticism. I follow many film critics that I almost never agree with, but I like them. I find their writing very interesting or pleasant to read and very insightful. In some rare instances, they can even change my mind or at least offer me, how to say, a new perspective on things. Then I might, again, not share it, not agree with it, but it's something new that can nourish my knowledge, my spirit. So it's great. It's great to disagree. It's perfect. Yeah, and I see also the reply to Panji. Yeah, indeed. I think Panji was mostly speaking about the phenomenon of the artistic quality. Okay, Vincentius. I see. Yeah, it's still Vincent. I want to hear your opinion as a journalist and film critics about Scorsese's statement, "Cinema is gone." As big companies keep filling cinemas with their franchise-obsessed contents that are really popular to mainstream audiences, do you think it is right? Anyone else feel free to state your opinion? Thank you. Okay, another big topic as well. About right or wrong. The point is that these studios are businesses. They need to earn. So they see that this formula works and they keep on following it. Potentially, audience has the power to determine whether something is successful or not. So until people will keep on watching these type of products, they will be on the rise. There will be more and more produced. We are in the golden age, probably, of superhero flicks in this sense. There were, I mean, I wouldn't say similar phenomena in past history, but cinema has always been commercial to some extent. I mean, if you look at the films from the 80s, like Back to the Future or other sagas, they were also following the same goal. Obviously, they weren't so expanded as superhero flicks are, with this the multiverse and all this variations on topic that they do. Again, I can't say what's right or wrong. Personally, as a viewer, I'm not saying this film shouldn't be there, because I know that they have an audience, but at the same time, I would love to see more variety. It's in a way, it's linked with the topic of diversity I was talking about. It's great to see this 40 years old couple divorcing again and again in Italian cinema. But Jesus Christ, I want to see something else also. The story is always the same. So personally, as a critic and as a viewer, with these films, I'm at that stage. Great, but I want to see something else. Or if we need still to work on this genre, we need to create something really different. Paradoxically, one of the best superhero flicks I watched was Freaks Out. I don't know if you're familiar with this film. It's an Italian film, actually. It was released last year at the Venice Film Festival. It has very typical characteristics of a superhero flick, but the main difference is that it's set during the Second World War, and basically it's set in Rome, and it is a weird mixture of characters from a movie like Freaks, the Todd Browning one from the 30s. I don't know if you're familiar with that one. And let's say the grandiosity of Marvel production for some aspects. But the villains are different. The storyline has lots of interesting details and tweaks that you normally don't find in a superhero film. There is the regional aspect that is very strong because these people basically speak both in dialect and Italian language, and it's super entertaining the way it is done. But again, it's a new version, a new exploration of the genre. About these things, I'm interested. Watching again, this fifth installment of the character I've already been watching, way less. So the point is, this is a business, and if people keep on paying for that, buying merchandise, this is going to last potentially forever. But obviously, things can change. I mean, Western are not so popular as they were in the 70s, for instance. They're still in there, so I don't think indeed superhero flicks will disappear, but they have a different prominence. And life, as well as art, goes in cycles. So now the 2010s, 2020s, maybe will be remembered as the years of the superhero films, or maybe the 2030s will be about body horror science fiction like Cronenberg. I don't know, it could be. So it's a comeback to the 80s in a way. It might happen. So yeah, obviously Scorsese probably speaks, well, I'm not in his head, but he speaks from a perspective for which indeed he sees that these films are becoming more and more present, and they are taking out space for other films. But again, audience decide. If the audience want to watch this, you can't hold them at gunpoint and change their mind. Obviously, distributors, public institutions, schools, studios can do some work to educate or make audiences familiar with other types of film, but it's a long process. It takes time. And in the meantime, even if these players are not actively involved in such process, cinema and spectatorship evolve. Just think about one of the first films in history, like the Lumiere brothers in late 19th century were showing this film where there was a train basically heading towards the camera. And at the time, people were sitting in the theater, got scared, and left the theater, thinking that the real train was approaching and smashing them. Now, when we watch a movie, we start long discussions about the detail, the level of detail of the blood, the CGI. Anyone can argue about a plot hole, because the spectatorship, regardless of many aspects, evolved. So most probably our appetite in 20, 30, 40, 50 years will be even harder to satisfy, at least for some aspects. Maybe it will be a focus on technical aspects, or will be even more obsessed with increased realism, which could be a direction, considering cinemas is also exploring new ventures with VR, AR, and other interactivity, blending with the video gaming industry and other technologies. Or maybe we'll get fed up with this. Maybe in 2050, we'll go back to simple 2D stories because we want to relax, and maybe we already do our daily job with the VR, and our escapism will be to sit and just watch a 60 minutes movie, possibly in black and white with the least information as possible. I don't know the future, but I can expect that maybe there will be a niche of retro film enthusiasts who look for that type of authenticity, and maybe there will be filmmakers producing films for this audience. So let's not be narrow in any case. Obviously, yeah, as I said, my opinion is that one. I believe there should be something more, but let's not be narrow. We don't know what expects us. All right. Thank you for the questions. In the meantime, I think it's maybe time to have a short break, so we can grab a coffee, cigarette, think through the things we touched upon. And come again, Kevin, sorry. You're muted.
Sorry, is 10 minutes enough for the break?
Yeah, 10 minutes would work. Yeah. So
All right.
10:30, we're back here.
All right.
See you in a while.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
All right, Davide, can we start again now?
Yep. Yep. All right. I think we're all back, so we can continue. I'll basically do a small thing that could be still interesting for you before, let's say, going back to reviewing and criticism. I wanted to show you quickly what is my other line of work, so that of film journalism, and how it is to some aspects actually connected with what film criticism is, or anyway with the whole business of film. So I'm gonna share actually my screen so I can show you how Cineuropa is structured, and I can talk through some aspects and some other pieces you could write, let's say, as a film journalist, and how you can manage to write these. So let me share the screen. Second. I want to increase the size so it's more visible. Okay. Okay, I guess you can see it, right?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, perfect. So, as I said, at Cineuropa, we cover quite an extensive range of countries and productions. Most of them are members of the European Union, but even some are just European countries like the UK. And just scrolling down. Okay, so what we do in a nutshell is festival coverage, industry reports, and I actually write most of these, reviews, obviously, interviews, video content, which has mostly video interviews actually, and depending on occasions, other types of pieces, and obviously industry news. Yeah, so on a daily basis. Festival coverage is quite extensive, I must say. We cover all the main ones, including Cannes, the Berlinale, and Venice. And well, one of the most typical news items we work on are the production stories. So as simple as that, someone is making a film, we report on it, and we disclose some details. For instance, I see some of them here. Yeah, this one. We can pick up this one, for instance. This is a production story, but it has also the angle of the film festival, let's say, because as you can see in the title, this director is preparing a big opening, title of the film, in time for Carlo Vivari, which is a big Czech film festival taking place in July. Most of the production stories, at least in Cineuropa, but even in some other publications, are structured this way. You get a one-liner title, which should catch the attention and include the title of the film, and possibly the director or a top cast member. Then a lancio, which is a 1, 2, max 3 lines, thorough description, a bit more thorough description of the title. So it adds some details. Like, for instance, we find out that the latest feature by the Czech actor turned director follows the misadventures of an eccentric actor turned director, so about himself apparently, or someone who has similar life experiences. Then there is an introductory paragraph normally about title of the project, the background of the director. Like we see here that they're mentioned the previous features and the follow-up, the previous features like Nowhere in Moravia is the debut film, and the follow-up drama, The Quartet. Then there is always a paragraph dedicated to disclosing the plot and possibly the actors who are playing some key roles. It's great where we can get them, we can include some exclusive quotes from a member of the cast, the crew, producer, sometimes even from people who commission work, especially in the case of TV series. Maybe we can get a quote from a Netflix rep or from the director of a TV channel who's been commissioning that series, that show. When possible, we add also some details about the technical crew. So, for instance, was the DOP or the editor or the costume designer, the set designer, blah, blah, blah. And then in the last part, we basically add the production credits, like the studios involved, the distribution firms / sales agents involved, when it's supposed to be released and where, these kind of details. As you can see here, Big Opening is being produced by Sylvie Mikhailova and Andrei Zima of Czech outfit Evolution Films and co-produced by Czech Television. Here, there is a list of the film funds that back the film: the Czech Film Fund, the City of Olomouc, the Olomouc region, the Olomouc region Film Office supported it. Falcon handles the Czech theatrical release, and the local premiere has been set for 21 of July. Here we got the trailer as well, embedded. So yeah, that's really a typical production story you can find on our website. Sometimes we manage to be the first reporting on a production, then we are talking about an exclusive. Because the thing is, when it comes to production stories, there are always two approaches you can follow. One is very simple and banal, but still part of the work, and the other one is more stimulating and a bit harder. So the first approach is, I call it jump on the boat, and the second one, I call it go hunting. And what do I mean? Jump on the boat means that you're not the first reporting the news. It's something great and relevant, though, to the work you do, to the publication you work for. So you need to report on that. Let's say that Screen International or Variety or Deadline publish an exclusive news about Paolo Sorrentino's or Pablo Larraín or Steven Spielberg's whatever new film. Well, Spielberg's we wouldn't cover him because he's American. I don't think he will co-produce with Europe. But let's imagine it's a European co-production or a European film made by Spielberg. Well, it's still something in line with our editorial policy. So what we do is to cover it first by quoting the original source. Second, possibly enriching the news. So maybe reaching out to someone for a comment or trying to ask a press office to disclose some more details. Sometimes it can be even something very small, like a still or the name of another actor or the name of a key crew member. That can always enrich the news and making it fresher and relevant and a bit more unique. So yeah, that's the easiest approach. There is something already known, I work on it, I report on it, and possibly try to expand that reporting. The other one is the toughest one, but also the most stimulating, going hunting. And in this case, I mean that you're the one looking for new productions, finding out that these projects are in the making and being the first one reporting on them. Normally, the easiest approach, I don't know how the Indonesian film industry works, but probably there are some common points. But anyway, what works really well in Europe is to follow the money. So, for instance, European cinema is heavily funded by public institutions. So, if you go on the websites of the Swedish Film Institute, the Screen Ireland, or another public agencies, you can more or less easily access their funding decisions. So you can see there is a list with a title, an amount of money allocated for production or distribution or post-production, it depends on the grant, and at least the name of a producer / production outfit that is receiving these funds. Well, the good news is that you already have some material there because you know that someone got some money to make a project with that name and there is a studio to get in touch with. Sometimes you're lucky enough that you can even see the name of the director attached there. So you know whether this project could be important to work on, or maybe it's anyway a new project by a new director that still deserves some coverage. So by looking at these funding decisions, you can start approaching people and ask to get more details. Obviously, the bigger the publication it is, the more they're likely to disclose some stuff, but it depends. especially when it comes to first-time directors. I've seen in many cases, even smaller publications managing to break some news or to do some fine reporting. So it's not impossible. And again, this job, you cannot be shy, as I said 1 hour ago. So no harm asking. Ask. You don't know, maybe you'll get a big thing, or anyway, they will be ready to disclose something. So it's always useful to be proactive and ask, especially if you start hunting for news. So by doing this and doing it regularly, basically being a bit of a stalker in productions, I'm sorry about this expression, this term, but it is what you do. You can slowly gain more and more access to production stories, to what's going on in the industry. You get familiar with certain territories, especially if you cover multiple ones. But even if you, let's say, you work just in Indonesia, I'm pretty sure that there are regional differences since it's such a big country. So you get familiar with specific territories or specific regional industries. So yeah, in Europe, it's rather easy in a way that you can follow the money. Of course, there are also projects that are not in receipt of public funds. So at that point, what becomes important is not so much looking at the beneficiaries of these funds, but create a solid network of acquaintances in the industry. And how do you do that? Well, when I was working, I wasn't working full-time as a journalist. I was using most of my holidays to go to festivals, industry events, and greet people, get to know them, and exchanging email addresses, business cards. So be there, show up, because the problem of this business is that until you show up and you say, hey, I'm here, nobody notices you. Nobody will come at your doorstep and say, oh, lovely journalist with a name that I should make up now, Mr. John. I don't have so much fantasy. Have a job ready for you. You'll become a film critic tomorrow. Want to join? No, that's not going to happen. Obviously, I'm more simplifying, but the point is you need to be there. You need to be visible. Obviously, you can't be anywhere, so you need to do this gradually, but the physical presence, especially in these 2 years of the pandemic, is an essential aspect of this work. You can't imagine how many films, how many ideas, how many collaborations, even between journalists. So if we talk about film criticism and film journalism, started in front of a glass of wine, while drinking a beer, while chatting, lining up for a film. So social interactions are essential. They're really essential, because the point is, there are so many people who could potentially write about films, but publishers, editors, or even producers who can give you access to some films or some sets need to see you, need to know you. And the fact that you're there and the other 99 people are not there already makes a huge difference. Obviously, it's a long process, it can be frustrating at times, maybe must be straightforward. There will be moments in which you think to give up, but if you're very persistent, you're going to make it. This industry, maybe some won't agree, or some other colleagues of mine will not agree. It's not about talent, it's about persistence mostly. Yeah, of course you need to be a good writer. You can't be too crappy, otherwise you wouldn't go anywhere. People would notice that your level of professionalism is too low. But at the same time, the ones who make it, they are consistent, that have a good presence, that manage to make this job for a living, are the ones who knock their head against the wall and go through hard times, but still don't surrender and insist. So that's really an essential aspect of this work. I would be unfair if I wouldn't mention this. So speaking about the industry stories, this is a very typical indeed type of reporting. I can go to my own page so I can show you, not because I want to show you my work necessarily, but just because I want to show the types of articles I write. and we write at Cineuropa. Yeah, for instance, this is an interview. This is more of an industry interview. So I met a distributor and exhibitor from Switzerland, and I spoke about why auteur films are struggling to record good sales in Europe, and how's the situation of the exhibition sector in the continent. So there are two main approaches for interviews, let's say, two main writing styles more than approaches. Some will ask you to do pieces where answers are written through, so there's no Q&A, but basically you write a bunch of paragraphs, and the quotes are included in the speech, or they are written through indirect speech. And some others, like the ones we use at Cineuropa, that are very simple and straightforward, so it's a Q&A. Obviously, you edit them for consistency, to condense some stuff, but you need to stick to the words that you said and the other guy said, obviously. Tweaks can be really minimal. And yeah, these are more conversational pieces. Indeed, as you can notice, this is something I do, but also many other colleagues do. Sometimes questions or good questions can even not be questions, but just statements or suggestions. As you can see here, there are some question marks missing, because if you really listen to what someone is saying, the question, the flow of the speech can be way more natural, and indeed, it's even more pleasant to read, but at the same time, it's more of an interactive discussion rather than me sitting and say, what's your take on this? And your take on this? And what about this? Which is more boring, but indeed, this is more of a model I like to follow. So it's important also to state and interact. Not too much, obviously, because you need to let the interviewer speaking 90% of the time, if not 95. But again, at the same time, you know, it gives you a better vibe while you talk, but at the same time, it gives a better piece. It's not too rigid in a way. Let me check something else. Yeah, this is a normal festival announcement. Actually, this is an industry project, yeah, about green film production, which will take place in Greece. Most of these announcements, when it comes to sources, you get them from the festivals or the PR agencies themselves. So they send you press releases. Press releases are golden mines, because especially the good ones are already structured like an article. So you can, obviously, you don't need to copy paste it, for God's sake, but you have already very good, solid information to write about. And you can use that press release to expand your article, reach out for comment, or to ask for some clarifications. But the very good ones probably will really end up as press releases you use for the write-up straight away. As I said, obviously you will select what you need, because some press releases are very long and filled with details, obviously, because they're in part promotional. But all the right things will be in there. One thing you mostly need to do when it comes to write a news based on a press release is to edit heavily the language, because obviously, if I'm Davide Abbatescianni organizing Davide Abbatescianni Film Festival, I'm very proud of Davide Abbatescianni Film Festival because I'm the organizer. So when I'll be talking about my own festival, I'll be using a very how to say self-praising language. So part of your work is to bring it down to reality, to make it as objective as possible, and it's something to take into account. Let me see. Yeah, this is an announcement about the new film fund that was opened in Sicily, for instance. So we do cover also the institutional moves. This is a very typical article I would write. It's basically an industry report. So there is a panel or a conference. There are experts speaking about a precise, specific film subject, in this case, circulation of European titles. And you write about it. This is very straightforward task. You need to summarize and understand what's important and what needs to be cut out. Because this event, for instance, lasted 2 hours. People said so many things, but not all the things were so important and relevant to our editorial line, editorial policy. So that's really a matter of exercising, listening, and understanding what's important, and working with very good editors, because the good editors can give you honest feedback and tell you, look, the piece is fine, but next time maybe focus more on this, or maybe don't be too lengthy when it comes to introducing the speakers. So they're very practical suggestions, obviously. But again, anyone can start with this type of articles. Actually, they're probably the simplest one if you want to do film journalism, to report on an event, report on a press conference or something. And it's a good exercise. It's a bit boring compared to breaking the news about a new super production. But first, you get to gain a lot of theoretical knowledge about the industry, which even as a film critic is very useful, because you don't lose touch with how the business works, with the type of money that circulates, with the type of people who speak at these events, who are the decision makers, after all. And on the other hand, you still hone your writing skills. So this is a review. The standard we have at Cineuropa is to stick to 500 to 600 words normally, so they're pretty short, dense reviews. Other publications go for longer formats, normally not over 1,000, 1,200 words. If they want to exaggerate, let's say, because again, we're talking about film reviews normally published during a festival and straight away. So they're not academic essays. They're really reviews focusing on what you've watched and what viewers should expect to watch. Here, this is a pretty typical example of the structuring I was talking about. So this is the under 150 word part where I introduce the movie, the main actors. So it's really introductory. Here I talk a lot about the narrative and, let's say, the atmospheres it creates. Here I focus on video cinematography. For instance, I touch upon the way this DOP frames the space with chiaroscuros on the tiny spaces of the workshops, the Medina streets, and so on. The same thing goes for bodies and faces, the color palette. So this paragraph is really about cinematography, because in that movie it's really crucial. It's linked with the emotions the characters are living and going through. Here I talk more about the narrative structure, and without making spoilers, where it or in what type of territory it wants to lead the viewers towards. And then the statement we were talking about. Pretty straightforward there. The sophomore feature, Tuzzani's sophomore feature is a brave film made with love and simplicity. It prompts important questions about what love is, how it can be expressed, and why it is the driving force of our very existence. Hopefully this great film will get the recognition it deserves on the festival circuit and beyond. As simple as that. You can be even more complex, more philosophical in giving the statement, obviously, but I'm very much focusing on simplicity most of the time. There are some films indeed in which I adopt a slightly different style, but the story is simple. It has a simple message. It's done nicely. Why should I use big words to express this concept? No need. It's not a competition about who knows more words from the dictionary. And here, yeah, this is an editorial thing we do. We always add the production credits at the end, but that's not, I mean, something so important. It's just an editorial how to say, habit we have and we follow, we need to stick to. But other reviewers use other types of structures. For instance, there is a colleague of mine called Marta Balag, who's very ironic, and she fills her reviews with jokes, and they're very clever ones. So they really work, especially when it comes to reviewing Eastern European films. Since she's from that region, she makes very pertinent claims, and her background, her spirit emerges quite nicely. So that's another example of, let's say, leaving your own signature, being present, but at the same time have a strong focus on the film itself. As a general suggestion, if you want to look at the trade publication as a writing model, so it's basically mine in this case, the one I have, but again, there are other types of publications you can follow. I would suggest you to read Variety, The Hollywood Reporter, Cineuropa, Screen International, but also other good publications like Sight and Sound, Movie Notebook. The Film Stage is good as well. The Playlist. So these are just a few names I have in mind, but there are many more. In the English language, publications are many, and the scene is quite rich. These ones cover mostly auteur films, but not only. I mean, on Variety, you can find even the Jurassic World, Jurassic Park saga reviews, or the latest flicks. We do also cover commercial flicks, but the main limitation we have is that since we cover European film, most of these are not financed by European sources. That's why you'll find them more rarely. But for instance, I think we published even reviews about Harry Potter and all the subsequent spin-offs because they are partly backed by the UK. So that makes them European productions or co-productions at least. So you can find also this type of films. I'll stop sharing it for a moment. Okay, so spoke quite a lot about some aspects of film journalism. Now, I wanted to ask you whether you have any questions or whether there are some aspects of the film journalism work that you'd like me to cover or touch upon. I guess there are no questions. I think we got one. Okay. Perfect. Hi, Julius. Okay, I'll read your question. I want to ask, is it a good idea to do a film review through the cinematic aspect, cinematography, mise-en-scène, editing, sound, and narrative aspect of screenplay? What do you think about this in film review? Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, it's good. It's a very classical approach. It's also the one I follow the most, like to focus on certain key visual aspects and the narrative. Let's say that maybe another focus I put emphasis on very often is the actor's work, but that's because also I used to study theater, and for me, it's a very crucial aspect. I was mentioning in the Instagram live a couple of days ago that for me, an important question I ask myself whenever I watch a film is this: do I believe the people on screen? Are they credible? Because the thing is, this is based on Stanislavski's idea of credibility. Normally, when Stanislavski was seeing actors on stage as a feedback, he was just saying, I believe you or I don't believe you. So we can even watch a very absurd display or a very surreal film, whatever it is. But if I end up believing what the actors are doing, the suspension of disbelief takes place organically, then it's all great, it's all legit. When this doesn't happen, there is a problem somehow, at least for me as a viewer, obviously, because maybe some others won't experience that thing. The same goes for documentaries, actually. Obviously, they are not works of fiction, but we still have subjects, human subject, characters who move in the frame. And the question is, do I feel the things I'm watching are authentic enough? Obviously, I know that the camera is in there. It's somehow affecting that person's existence. I mean, unless it's a hidden camera, he knows that someone is filming them. But how much, how heavy is the presence of the camera there? If the presence is not so heavy and I feel that everything is organic, then it's good. Probably I'm watching a good documentary, and I know that the director most probably did such an extensive work to put at ease that person or that group of people, so that it doesn't look like it is how to say fake in a way. So this is a very crucial aspect about the aspect of credibility. About let's say some aspects that you can focus on, or some things you can do not to make your review amateurish. There is one big suggestion I can give. Whenever you state an opinion, ask yourself and explain then in your writing why. It's very amateurish to say, I don't like Kristen Stewart acting. Why? What's wrong there? Explain it, please. If you do that, you're already standing out from the crowd, because sometimes even some professional reviewers don't explain it. So I also make some mistake probably in some reviews. There are some things where I didn't answer clearly why I said that, for God's sake. But it's something I try to always keep in mind. I always try to give an answer, even as a very simple one, because obviously, again, it's not an essay. You need to be anyway very condensed, very sharp and brief. But ask yourself why. Why you state a thing, like why is the cinematography for you stunning? Why the editing doesn't work? Why that actor is delivering a poor performance? Why the color palette is wrong? Why there is a plot hole there? Sometimes it's really complicated to explain why, especially when it comes to review very bad films or films full of inconsistencies. You literally go crazy. But what you can do is at least to pick 1-2 examples of this inconsistency, and then say that perhaps it is interspersed throughout the film. So you can even be straightforward with the viewer and say, look, I cannot delve into every single scene, but I can say that the movie is riddled. It's like filled with these incongruencies, yeah, and mention some examples simply. So that's already a very good thing. Obviously, with the training, with the experience, you learn how to express these things with a more professional language and with the correct cinematic language. So very useful and simple thing one can do is to read some books of history of film and understand what's the difference between a mise-en-scène, a mise-en-abîme, or between all the types of shots. Well, if you're a film student, most probably you know already 90% of these ideas because they are being taught in film schools. But that's already most of the job. I mean, to be honest, I started reviewing films as soon as I was out of the film school. So that was my knowledge, but it was at least sufficient to start. Obviously, I kept on studying and reading, and I learned some tricks with the experience, with the editors giving me some good feedback. But again, if you have some film education, it's already enough to start. As I said, for me, it's important to substantiate your arguments, explaining why something it is that way. to not shy away from delving into details, but at the same time, being aware you can't say everything, so you need to make a choice. Be aware of your background, which can give a unique vibe to your review. And personally, I prefer also to give a more impersonal style to my writing without talking in first person. That's another suggestion I can give. But again, especially the last one, this rule can be broken for many reasons. So that's already something good to work on. So all these things I'm saying, obviously, keep them in mind because they might be useful at the end of the day. Sorry about these noises. They are renovating the building next to mine. So they will be useful, I was saying, these aspects and these suggestions when at the end of today's lesson, I'll ask you to work on a film and to write something. I'll go for the next question. As a film critic working in Europe, let me ask about how Indonesian films are perceived. Do they often appear in festivals? Have there been any Indonesian films that have been talked about? Okay. I don't know about the general perception of Indonesian films. Definitely, time to time, they are screened to European festivals. Sometimes they are Indonesian production or more often even co-productions. So yeah, there is some representation. But at the same time, going back to the topic of diversity, I think we need more films from the region, including Indonesia. Personally, I'm not so expert of Southeast Asian films, so I cannot give you exact perspectives. And I can't say honestly, at least over the last 2-3 years, there was an Indonesian film that stood out in the festival circuit. But again, there are so many festivals every month. So probably some of my colleagues actually watched something that won a prize in, I don't know, Portugal or in other places, and they could answer this question better. So no, but according to my experience over the last few years, I can't recall an Indonesian film that stood out. But at least I'm talking just about the coverage I was assigned to do and the festivals I was covering, which is a fraction of the whole landscape. So in this sense, my experience and my vision is very limited. Right. Any other questions? Otherwise, I would go to, I would be ready to cover 2 other topics that are useful for budding film critics, but also in general to look for work, basically. There are tips you could follow. Okay, I guess I can go ahead. Anyway, if something comes to your mind or you have other questions later on, just pop them in the chat and I'll answer them as soon as possible. So one thing I wanted to talk about a bit are PR firms or PR agents, basically the press people you need to work with to get access to news, films, talents, to interview. So in general, they do good work, I must say, though things are changing in this industry and some of them are unfortunately transforming more into, yeah, I mean, they always promote their own films, but at the same time, they tend to put more pressure on journalists to do a certain type of coverage or to write certain types of things. So it's your duty to remain independent despite of these pressures. For instance, a thing that happens rather commonly and I find quite annoying is that someone finds out that I was attending a screening and then the PR agent writes me an email asking, so what do you think about the film? Can you share something with me before the piece gets published? I don't answer to these emails. I must be independent in my process of reviewing a film. I understand your concern because it's your work, but at the same time, you're not helping your film by asking me in advance what I think about it. It's a pretty annoying, actually. And some people do that. Some other PR agents know our work is how pitching works, and they never do that. They're very polite, very helpful, and they know that when it comes to screening a film at a festival, the film is public, then it becomes an object of public discussion. So it can be praised, criticized, bashed, anything can happen. So they should be ready to that, and they should be open to that. So some PR firms, especially the best, most established ones, know that very well. Some others know. Sometimes they're just inexperienced, or maybe they don't realize how things work, or maybe there are even regional differences. Maybe in some countries, some things are normal practices. Then maybe they bring a movie to Europe and they believe that things would work the same way. But definitely, I can say that most of the press agents I work with, they're very good people, they're very helpful, they're good sources when it comes to news, but also they help you when it comes to cover the film, like providing you a screener in advance or giving you access to interview a director or an actor. So the best ones are very well organized. They always try to answer your queries. And the good thing is that in many cases, even if you work for a small publication, you will end up working with them. And especially smaller titles are very open to coverage, even for smaller outlets. So if you're starting off through press agents, you can start writing your pieces, gaining access to the things you need to gain access to. Obviously, when you're at the festival and you know that you can watch a film freely, you don't need to be in touch with them. There's no need. Actually, it's even better not to be in touch with them. You just go there, watch the film, write a review, and that's it. The interaction is more needed if you can't access the film somehow. So you need to ask to the press agent to provide you with a screener. Or maybe if you need to interview someone, or you need to write maybe a feature about the movie. So not necessarily a review, but more of an essay or an article touching upon some aspects, or maybe you need a quote for some kind of reason. Anyway, they are good people to keep in your contact list. Absolutely. Most of your work will be done through these people. And every movie has a press officer normally. There are even some cases where the movie, the production is not so rich, so some production people do that. Or sometimes even the director himself or herself or themselves can write you and say, hey, I made a movie. Let's talk about it. But also festivals have their press offices. And the festival press offices are actually the ones that can open you the most access to the full festival experience. So access to screenings, master classes, workshops, anything that is taking place in there. Sometimes when you have the luck to be invited by festivals, they arrange practical things like your accommodation, your meals, your flights, whatever you need, basically. So yeah, the more you go to festivals, the more you might end up meeting these people. And these are very precious connections, because the way this business works is based on a snowball model. So starting off is very hard and tough. I can tell you from my personal experience that I struggle to, let's say, find new publications for at least a couple of years. So I kept on writing only for Cineuropa, and I struggled to travel in the very beginning of my career because nobody knew me. And most of the cases when I was approaching people, especially via email, my approaches, my emails, my requests were unsuccessful because I didn't know. First, I didn't know what to write to make my requests more compelling, and second, I didn't then have enough background to be considered, let's say. But the good news is that once you go over a certain threshold, it's a snowball. If you do a good job, things come after one another. At a very good stage, you might even end up refusing work, refusing stuff because you're so overwhelmed and you need to start choosing. what you would like to focus on. But it takes time, and it's not for everyone the same amount of time, obviously. But it all comes back to the speech about persistence, not being shy, ask questions, be curious, be there, fundamentally. So yeah, that's an important aspect. Now, obviously, let's assume that I'm starting off and I want to enrich my portfolio to get more and more work and possibly transform my passion into my profession. What can I do? First suggestion I give is to never write for free unless you're doing it for a very limited time just to start off because you don't find any alternatives to get published anywhere. That's the only case I would say, okay, you can do it for free, but for a while and for little. As soon as you have even 10, 12 stories that are well written, published, on a decent outlet, well, you can basically stop doing that and look for paid opportunities. This is work, it takes a lot of time, and it must be paid adequately. I'm really sorry about this, and I'm really embarrassed, but they don't care about us. Anyway, so you can do it just for the beginning, just to fill up your portfolio. A practical recommendation I would give you is to create a portfolio on macrack.com. It's for free. You can basically, I can type it here, so you have the website at hand. Just a moment. Yeah, this one. Basically, maybe I just brought it to come and I'll share it with everyone. Just a moment, actually send a direct link. Actually, you know what I can do? I can go on the website and show you my profile so you can have a better idea of how to fill it and how important it is to have a profile. So, moment. Share screen. Okay, I think you can see it now. So Macrack is for free. You can create your own profile. You can be verified after basically sending your phone number and some other details. You can put your areas of interest, in this case, for me, arts and entertainment and world news. Then most of the cases, the good thing is on Macrack is that if you write for mid to big publications, it captures your articles automatically. It creates a list of the outlets where you were featured. You can edit this list, obviously, but still, it's self-populated. You can write what you like to cover. Indeed, in my case, I'm interested in covering film media and culture topics of a specific focus on Ireland, the UK, and the EU. Doesn't cover, Lord save us from celebrity news. But that's me. I really don't like it. Then there is a short description. Normally it's embedded from your Twitter profile, but you can also write your own. And you can add a more extensive bio. So here I explain the publications I work for, where I'm based, the festivals I usually cover, my side jobs as a film curator, and the places where I've been to do my lecturing activities. And I even link my full CV here. But you can really choose what to focus on. I would say this mine is even a bit too long. If you put just, this should be the ideal length. And then basically you have the full portfolio of articles. As you can see, I wrote 1,141 stories to date. So most of these are self-populated. I publish them and they're captured from the web. Some others you need to add them manually, if you like. There are two approaches to use this profile. Some people decide to, like me, keep the capture tool active, so it's full of updated news. Some others decide to put 10, 20, 30, 40 selected stories, and that's it. It's up to you, really. It really depends on what you want to focus on. For me, since I do a lot of industry coverage, which is very timely, I prefer to keep the flow active. So people who are interested in me as a film journalist see that I'm always up to date, let's say, and I was at all the recent festivals. But for instance, if you want to be a film critic and focus on more essayistic or curatorial approach or something else, maybe having 20 good reviews is more than enough. And maybe update it time to time, just not to keep 2 old articles there and show the best of your writing. Yeah, and then obviously you can check them. Once you're verified, your Twitter feed is linked, so you can see it here. Here you can also add some answers to a self-interview you can do. You can be ironic or not fill them if you don't care, or give serious plain answers. It's up to you. But it's very good because with this one, you can basically search for the contacts of other journalists, other editors, and it's really, really huge, and it's free, so you can use it. Another website you can use, it recently changed name, but I can look for it. It used to be called, I'm not using it so much anymore, but it used to call Pitchways. Yeah, maybe it's still called Pitchways. No, they changed the name. Well, I'll find it later, and I will. I think they changed the name recently. Anyway, it's basically a platform where you can find jobs announcement for journalists, but also for film writing. And I found a couple of publications to freelance for there. But this is not a job like an ad-based job in general. The easiest thing to do to find job is to look for publications and look for the editor's contact and approach them directly. What I was doing in the very beginning, which was really wrong, not working, was to write rather long emails where I was introducing myself, my background, and say, hey, look, I'm in Ireland. I used to live there. Now, immediately, I covered these festivals. Do you need, by any chance, someone who could review some films or interview some people here, blah, blah, blah? It was very long. It didn't feel so confident, and it didn't work in most cases. What really works with editors to get new work, and sometimes even straight away, it's surprisingly fast, is to write an email, introduce yourself in 1-2 lines at most, then maybe put in the brackets your macro profile or another portfolio website, and then go straight away, have a pitch for you below. And in 2, 3, 4 lines, you just describe what you want to work on, and you can perhaps put 1, 2, max 3 ideas for a story. And this can apply to reviews, but also to other types of coverage. Obviously, when it comes to reviews, there's little you can write. You can just say that you'll be able to access that film. Perhaps it's a world premiere, or you got the screener, or you just live in that town and you can go to the festival and you can cover it for them. And you can just add 1-2 lines of the synopsis and mention who's the director or the actors if they're prominent. And maybe 1 line saying why that film could be interesting to be covered for that publication. Sometimes you don't even need to write that, because, for instance, if the publication is clearly focusing on Algerian films or Indonesian films or Spanish films, and the film is Spanish, it's a big release, it's obvious that it's in line with the editorial strategy of the publication. Sometimes it's a bit less obvious and you can state it more clearly. Like, I believe it could be a nice piece because the film tackles environmental topics such as pollution and the exploitation of cows. It's an example, obviously. So I believe your science pub could be interested in giving it some space, for instance. But really, be brief, introduce yourself straight away, because anyway, it's just an email. You're not shaking hands with this person, so you'll become just a name in the email. And might be so forever. In some cases, there are some editors I've never met, but we have an intense email exchange. So at some point, your own personality becomes, I mean, what they know becomes only your writing. And the question is, why me as an editor who gets 100, 200, 1,000 emails per day should I answer to you? Because you need to bring an advantage to my company, to my business, to my publication. So be clear and straightforward on the advantage, the unique access, the time, the fact of being timely, the pros, the benefits you can bring to that editor. Because otherwise, your email will end up in the bin. And it's not because they are bad people. In most of the cases, because I know I was frustrated myself not to get many replies, and I'm talking in the likes of hundreds. But the point is, now that I'm not even an editor, so I don't assign pieces, or very rarely I do that. As a journalist, I end up receiving, on average, 100 emails. If I would start answering to every single person writing me, I would need to hire another person who does that, or I would stop writing. I wouldn't earn anymore. So I can imagine an editor gets more and more emails. And I know that for sure, because I obviously work with some of them, and I know how busy they are. But another thing to do is don't hesitate to follow up, because indeed, sometimes they even have in mind that they want to answer to you, but they just forget it because the workflow is so intense and so busy. So my golden rule is that, and more or less it works, is to follow up not more than twice after the first contact. And if the pitch is not so time sensitive, give it some days in between. I would say not less than 3 days and up to a week. So yeah, let's say you send an email on day 1, you can send a follow-up on day 4 or 5, and then last follow-up on day 8 to 10, more or less. When it's time sensitive, so it's an exclusive news, maybe also it's a news that is important that you potentially could sell it to someone else, specify it in the email. I need to get to know your feedback ASAP. This is very important, especially when it comes to exclusive or very sensitive topics. For instance, when the Russian-Ukrainian war broke, there were some news related to that very moment, the reactions of the film community. I need to know an answer about my pitch in a few hours' time, 1 day at most, because otherwise it would get too old and too irrelevant. And there you can afford yourself to even follow up in 1-2 days. But it must be really something important, otherwise it's just annoying, honestly. Yeah, otherwise you can stick with these few days rules and not more than 2 follow-ups, because then you can assume that the editor, 1, doesn't have time to answer, 2, is not interested, then doesn't have time to answer, 3, maybe he never received the email, it ended up in the spam folder, and that happens more often than ever. But if he doesn't check the spam folder, they won't find about you. But you can contact other people. I mean, they are not the only ones in the universe that are able to publish your work. So there is a website, actually 2 of them I would recommend you, especially if you're interested in doing some writing in English. The first one is Who Pays Writers? It's about money, so we can find out how much you would earn out of it. So this is basically a huge list of publications, English language ones. Some are not English language, but most of them are, where basically journalists submit anonymous feedback and they explain how much they were paid per word, when they were paid, whether they were paid, because there are also publishers who are not so good and they trick you. And sometimes they add just some details about their own experience. For instance, I don't know, we want to find out how much The Guardian pays, okay? So big British publication, or the US edition, The Guardian, let's say. Okay, we see that this person for 600 words got 63 cents. We're talking about US dollars here. For an editorial or / column piece. it's a cold pitch. Cold pitch, it means that someone approached the editor without knowing that person. So like I said, you send an email and say, hey, I have something for you. And it's comforting. It means they're open also to new people in a way. Obviously, check also the dates, because here it's 2021, I see the date, so it's relatively recent. But as you can see, the rates differ, because maybe that editorial department has a different budget. Maybe they pay people with different levels, depending on their experience or depending on the type of reporting they're doing. For instance, this one is very well paid. You see 4,000 words feature, $1.27 per word. But most probably it is because the work is very heavy. It's heavy investigative reporting. So it's not something you could write into hours, obviously, because you get paid a lot. This is a blog post, and indeed the pay goes as little to 13 cents. By saying it's the same publication. Obviously, the bigger they are, the more you get detailed feedbacks, but there are also some small publications that are being reviewed here. It's a very useful tool. Another one I could recommend you. It has a similar, let's say, tab with the payments, but it is full of resources for people who want to become freelance journalists, including critics. And the name of this place is Journal Resources. I know the founder because she was in Cork for a free masterclass 2 years ago. She's a very nice girl. She's probably 30. She was very young, and she's created this resource, this website from scratch, and it's full of useful tips, advice about how to pitch, how to follow up, money advice. It's really, really great. It's English language focused, obviously. But unfortunately, I can only talk to you about this market because it's the market I work in. But there are also some general recommendations you can follow in your own work, regardless of the market you're working in. So when it comes to money, you see, there is a page about salaries, which I hope will load by the end of this year. Perfect. Yeah, for instance, here we see the average salaries in the UK, in London and outside of London for a certain position, like broadcast journalist, £37,000 per year, for instance, or a communication marketing officer, copywriter, digital editor, editorial assistant, features writer. So this gives you an idea of their market. But this is more important for you if you want to become a freelance journalist. The freelance rates. You see, there are even publications that openly don't pay, so skip them. Others pay little, others they pay well, but you can get a huge, let's say, amount of outlets that are potentially ready to take pitches that they pay. You know that Al Jazeera pays $350 for a new story. It's not a bad rate at all. I can confirm it's true because I work for them, so that's what they pay. And for instance, if you're indeed in Indonesia, they're very open to regional stories, to local stories that can be given by people on the ground. So if there is a festival, including this one, you could propose a pitch to them. And most of the contacts are even public, or you can really search for the editors on Twitter, on LinkedIn. You just need to dig deep into the web, but in 99% of the cases, you can find them, even the very big publications. It's not impossible to find the direct contact with the editors. Obviously, unless clearly stated, avoid sending pitches to the info at or this very general inbox, because nobody's going to check that. Some outlets have very specific, how to say, inboxes they use for pitches. And you can use that one as well, obviously. But otherwise, just find the editor, the person who will be working with, who has the authority to give you some work. So the landscape is huge, especially if you write in English. Any country has a bunch of English language publications. So there is space, especially if you bring your own, I would say, unique voice, even regional possibly. You can basically work as a correspondent for some nice outlets, bring at home, build them, and gradually start earning. So yeah, that's basically, these are two resources I would strongly recommend. I'll copy these links in the main chat so you can keep them. I'll stop sharing. So journal resources. I mean, I copy paste the freelance rates page, but you can really, how to say, you can really check the whole website. It's really great. Now her business expanded so much that she even hired some people who create the content. She was alone in the beginning. Sometimes she looks even for people to do some work, so she even opens up some ads. And she's particularly keen to hear from people from outside of Europe. So take a look, maybe you'll find something interesting. And wait a second, the other one, who pays writers? Don't hesitate to use LinkedIn for networking. That's what's supposed to be for, even though some people keep on using LinkedIn as it is Instagram or Facebook, and that doesn't work. But really use it, and there really don't shy away from greet someone, say, "Oh, thank you for accepting my connection. Look, I'm a journalist. I was wondering whether you're interested in this story." Blah blah blah. You can use it, and in some cases you can actually find the direct email contacts on LinkedIn even without adding the people. So it's a really great tool to find the editors. Okay, so I'll stop for a moment. Any questions or aspects you want me to cover related to what I was just talking about? Okay, Vincent has a question, I see, right. To fill up the portfolio for us beginners, where do you think it's better for us to display our piece? It is on our blogs, media, social media, or a free community-based news writing platform, more popular websites. Use Instagram as a mini blog to write about few reviews. I'll be not professional. Okay. Well, Instagram, you can use it for fun, let's say, but yeah, if you look for serious work and you want to start doing this as a profession, not as an hobby anymore, or not just as an hobby, two recommendations. Either you find an outlet, like a publication. It can be an online publication, not necessarily on paper, for God's sake. Also, 99% of what I do is online only, so sometimes, yeah, I write for print, but rarely. It can be even small magazine. It must not necessarily be huge to start. Obviously, the bigger, the better, I must say, or especially if you manage to get to work for an established publication, like as an intern or something, it's great for your CV. And if it's just for a limited amount of time or limited work, you can do it for free, but just for the beginning, then you need to demand the money and be paid fairly. So yeah, I would recommend you to intercept a publication. If you don't find any, opening your own blog is still a good idea. You can do it, but it's better to work for someone else, because the point is, it's mostly a psychological trick. When someone starts evaluating your work and sees that there is someone else giving a stamp and saying, "Oh, this is good to go," even just ideally, even just the name of the publication, it makes them more prone to give you work, because like subconsciously they think, "Oh, someone else already trusts Vincent. Maybe I can trust him too." If you do it yourself, you're the source, you're the editor. But again, it depends on what kind of form of film criticism you're into. If you want to become a film critic who's a video essayist, I don't know if you're familiar with this world, then yeah, blog is the way. I mean, or you can start with your own stuff, not necessarily land at Movie or Little White Lies or Sight and Sound directly. So preferably, I would say write for an outlet. The more visible, the bigger, the better, but not necessarily. You shouldn't torture yourself if you don't find a big outlet. Even normal daily in your own hometown could be okay. Also, it depends on the story. If you're writing some local reporting to start with, it's fine if the outlet is small. I mean, it takes time, it's gradual. So nobody will expect you to start working from the first article for Al Jazeera or for the CNN or for BBC Culture or for I don't know, the broadcast corporation. It's normal. It takes time. So yeah, preferably that. Then yeah, create your own portfolio. Another thing you can do, which I've done, it's very simple and rather cheap, is to create your own website. But a website not on Wix or WordPress. I mean, you can use WordPress or Wix as a basis for the website, but it's better to have your own domain. And there are some places where you can pay as little as 10 euros even per year. And you get the full domain, and you get access to all the tools. Obviously, if you don't have the money in the beginning to buy for the domain, you can still use the Wix and WordPress, and for God's sake, it's not bad. But preferably, again, it's a matter of image. I know the quality of your writing doesn't change if the website is called johnsmith.wordpress.com or johnsmith.com. But all these tiny aspects that many people think are secondary, in some cases play a big role because they build the image around you. I'm not so fond of this, obviously. If I wouldn't be a journalist, probably I wouldn't even be social media, because in my personal life, my private life, I enjoy having beers with my friends, going around, traveling, and not necessarily taking a picture of the food I ate or the travels I did. But because my work is based on the public image, on my own voice, I need to be there to see what other people are doing and saying and sharing. But I also need to do that to show the world I'm active, that I'm ready to take work, that you can invite me to festivals, that I'm in business, baby. That's the problem of this work. But again, it's not even a problem. It's if you know how to balance it, it becomes a good weapon to get more and more work. So yeah, about websites like Rotten Tomatoes, IMDb, Letterboxd, I would say, yeah, you can use them, but maybe it's better that you write the article, let's say, on an outlet or on your own blog as a second option, and then you repost on these websites your own review. So it gains even more authoritativeness on the website, and people still know that that piece was originally published on an outlet. So it's just, you're just quoting yourself. Next question from Miko. Hello, Davide. I'm Miko, a movie enthusiast. I have a question about dichotomy of Indonesian moviegoers. Most people watch movie as entertainment. Only few of them see movie as work of art and every aspect of it. Okay. My opinion, this condition makes some good movie can't have a good impression by majority of Indonesian moviegoers. What should Indonesian movie bloggers should do to introduce the deep meaning of film to larger audience? Okay. Broad question. Definitely you can play a role. Probably not a huge one in the very beginning, but well, to tell you the truth, you shouldn't be alone in this fight. First, because indeed there is the whole movie community, including viewers, critics, and filmmakers. But to educate people to a strong, proper cinema culture, a rich one, simply, you need to have a state or institutions or big industry players that work towards that. If the burden is only smashed on you or on the film critics only, you're gonna have little or anyway less chances to popularize other types of content. It's very complicated. Obviously, what you can do is to speak about those movies, to advertise them, to to review them. Even the fact that you're covering them, you're really doing more than enough, as much as you can. That's why, indeed, as I said, I'm not against superhero flicks or other things, but I believe they are really everywhere. And it's not only about superhero flicks, it's in general about many other mainstream genres, that there's no space for other films. But the market is so big and uncontrollable, you can do your own good 1-2% by talking about these films. Publishing about it, sharing with your friends, but don't torture yourself because you have a very limited impact. And even big film critics have limited impact. So keep on doing it, but don't torture yourself. Anyway, the market, the masses will always rule. Unfortunately, it's the law of numbers. So definitely in your own bubble, you can do much. Like, I don't know, you can show your family or your friends other types of films, your partner. As I said, you can write about it. But again, unfortunately, you need to realize that you'll be a small drop in the ocean. But it doesn't mean it won't have an impact. It will be very small, simply. That small drop could become a bit bigger when you become a professional film critic and when you get more and more exposure, but it will be still a drop, just a more chubby drop, let's say. But yeah, that's the reality of things, unfortunately. It doesn't mean things might not change forever, or maybe at some point critics or other players in the industry will have more influence in educating audiences to other types of films, because even the new tech that is coming in, VR, AR, the general aspect of the interactivity, the blending with the video gaming industry I was mentioning 1-2 hours ago, they're really unpredictable. Basically, there was in Cannes this very interesting panel with, I think it was a British neuroscientist. Yeah, and basically the guy was saying, was talking about the impact of films and other works of art on our brain in very broad terms. But then at some point I asked, but look, what are the consequences or the studies that are already published that explore the effects of AR and VR on human brain, on the people's perception of reality? And the guy said, well, there's little, we don't know anything. We don't know what kind of prolonged damage or benefits these can bring. So just to be straightforward, what we're talking about today will get probably old in 5-10 years at most. So it doesn't mean that also the spectatorship, the concept of spectatorship, the concept of cinema won't change. What is for sure is that we live in an era, in a century where the demand for content is growing. So the appetite for content is more and more. It's just increasing. Maybe theaters will change their role. Production will change to some extent. It's already changing because of the streaming platforms and the new tech. But we don't know what's next. And there we will also see how public institutions, governments, film schools, the education system will interact with spectatorship, what they will do to educate them. In many countries, they do very little to nothing. So some public broadcasters put very little effort in proposing different types of content, or they don't advertise them adequately. Because again, we're in a society of image. I was talking about your own image on social media, the other people's image. Even these products doesn't mean they don't have the potential to be groundbreaking, but they're not advertised adequately in many cases. People don't know about them. Probably if they would know, they would watch them and spread them around. So for now, let's try to be nice, clever drops in the ocean, but this thing is out of our control, mostly. I hope I answered to some extent to your question. Anything else you want to ask me? Because I see we are coming to a close, and I want to spend the last 5 minutes to give a small assignments for the people who will be active participants of the second day of the workshop, because we'll be working a bit more concretely after all this rambling and theory. Okay, yeah, got another one from Vincent. Have you ever had a piece of your reviews that's really different from audience opinions? For example, you review a film that you think it's good, but turns out everyone thinks it's bad film, and vice versa. If you have, how do you handle it? Will you change your mind about it? And if not, can you share to us what is the most underrated film you ever watched and reviewed? Thank you. Great question. I can talk about another aspect of the job here. It's very interesting to cover. I can basically tell you something I mentioned already in the Instagram live. Basically, last year, no, actually, was it 2021? 2021, I think. Yeah, anyway, yeah, last year. Last year, I reviewed Denis Villeneuve's Dune, this super grandiose science fiction movie. Probably you watched it, or if you know what I'm talking about. And I'm one of the not so many people that really didn't like it, and I explained in my review why. And for the first time in my life, I received the so-called shitstorm. So people started insulting me all over the place on Twitter, Facebook. But again, the perception of this is very distorted, because there were 200, 300, I don't know the exact number, people yelling at me, and some idiots even sending me death threats in private messages. But there were also thousands and thousands of people who reacted positively, or just didn't react, so at least didn't find it so annoying that they had to scream at me. But these people have less voice, apparently, because maybe they don't comment, they just read the news, they don't share it. So the interactions are in there. It doesn't mean that the reader wasn't going through the article, but he didn't express his take publicly. He didn't show any sign of appreciation or disagreement, nothing, basically. So you need to be strong on your opinions. Since you're not a robot, and since, thank God, we cannot be yet replaced by robots in doing this job, you shouldn't care about how many of you think the same way. Since we live in a planet populated by 8 billion people, I'm pretty sure you'll never be alone with your ideas. Maybe it will be hard to find someone who thinks the same way, but even if so, you're unique. It's your writing, it's your perception, it's what you're paid for. You're not paid to advertise the movie and talk about the plot. The moviegoer goes to cinema, he sees the film, he knows what's going on there. They don't need someone else going through facts and making compliments throughout without substantiating them with solid arguments. They don't need that. So who cares? I wouldn't say I've changed my mind totally about the film after reading other people's reviews. Definitely, it's it's a very good process to open up your perspective. So maybe I slightly changed my opinion on some aspects of the film, or I understood how that film, that scene, that character, that acting style could have been perceived differently by another type of audience. And it's great knowledge. But at the same time, you need to be bold. You need to be brave and go with your ideas, because otherwise you start becoming biased, but not with your own bias, with the other people's bias. So you start living someone else's life. Otherwise, you start being influenced by the press agents, by the flow of the masses. And I'll guarantee you, this already happens in a very subtle way. There are some people, for instance, that get fed up with mainstream movies because they're being spoken everywhere. That's one of my biases. So they don't want to watch this film because they've been bombed literally by that content. In my case, Game of Thrones, I haven't watched it yet because I was literally bombed from it. Then I never found also the time, and I wasn't just interested in that type of narrative, that it creates a sort of dislike, a pre-dislike. But maybe Game of Thrones is great, indeed. That's the problem. I can't judge it. I haven't watched it. But again, you need to be bold. You need to know that the media sphere and the work itself, the raw work, is something else. They are two different things. Let me check also some other aspects of the question. The most underrated film. But there are definitely some examples. I'm just trying to find one right now. Because, yeah, that happens rather frequently, that I go against, not intentional, obviously, the common opinion or the most widespread opinion, which anyway is the most perceived widespread opinion, because we don't get service for each film where every single viewer rates it 1 to 10. Even IMDb is very unreliable tool. The same goes for Letterboxd, because, okay, there are thousands of people reviewing a film with this star system, but we don't know where they are from, what type of audience, because if you show, I don't know, Peppa Pig, masterpiece. If you show Peppa Pig to children aged 5 and you ask 20,000 children aged 5 to rate Peppa Pig, probably Peppa Pig gets 10 stars or 9 stars, because obviously it's their target. It makes sense that they love her. But if you ask 50,000 people aged plus 65 to review Peppa Pig, well, it will be lower. Probably the average will be 3, 4. So it's really relative. It's really relative. So no, really don't care about this. Otherwise, you enter into other tricky dynamics. Don't be afraid. Actually, sometimes when you're against a very widespread opinion, you end up also finding your own niche of supporters that said, "Oh, finally someone said it." So, but again, also criticism shouldn't be like watching a football game. It's not about supporting and say, go, score this one. I really don't like also some critics that perceive their work as supportive. Like, it's about the analysis of an object. And also, what is very interesting from sport and football in particular that you could bring into your criticism work is that every game is a new story. Every film is a new story. There are directors I really don't like because I've seen 20 movies and they are all bad for me. But every time I go to watch a new one, for me, in my mind, okay, clear mind, it's a new game. Let's see what's going to happen. And I wouldn't be surprised, and it happens sometimes, that that single film or a new course in the director's biography is much more interesting, much more appealing, and why not? I can be in front of a masterpiece or a really good film, despite I didn't like all the previous 10, the previous 20s. So always open mind. People change, the world changes, society changes, everything changes. So even the performance of a director can change a lot. It's the performance of an actor. Kristen Stewart is awful in most of her roles, in my opinion. But if tomorrow she's asked to play, I don't know, Mother Teresa, just to give an example, and she does a great work, why shouldn't I say she's great? She's done a great job. Good. Keep on, keep on, go on with that. So no, just white slate. It's very helpful. Don't become obsessed with comparing the previous work and other things. It can be useful, but especially the extreme comparative approach is more useful when you do essay writing. When you write a review, the focus should be that film, that 90, 100 minutes experience. So now, since I see we're running out of time, for the people who are going to be active participants of the second day, I have this simple task so we can work a bit together. I would like you to write, if you can, a review, taking into consideration all the suggestions I gave, but even ignoring them if there is a good reason to ignore them. and there might be, of either one of the two films that were recommended. So I think we had The Breadwinner and the French version of Perfect Strangers, which I haven't watched. So I'm actually interested in seeing as a viewer what I perceive from your reviews. And Jesus Christ, sorry about that. And I'm gonna kill these people. We're almost done, so I can commit my crime after this workshop, but probably won't have the second day of workshop otherwise. No, what I wanted to say, except for this stupid joke, is that if you don't feel comfortable for some reason with these two films, or you didn't have simply time to watch them, you can even choose a film of your liking, but take into consideration that I might have not watched it. So I will ask you many questions probably while I read the review. But at the same time, if I won't ask you any, it means that it's quite clear. I get a clear sense of what the film is about. So really, pick up one of these two films, or another one you have watched, possibly something recent, I would say. So something that was released over the last 2 years, let's say. It can be European, American, Indonesian. It really can be anything. Feature film, that's the requirement. So at least 60 minutes in length. Could be documentary or fiction film, no problem with that. Could be animation, really anything in terms of genre. About the length of the review, minimum 400, 450 words, max 700. So ideally stick to 500 to 600. But again, if you write 400 words and they're great, you've done an amazing job. I don't care about quantity, but about quality. So tomorrow we'll check these reviews. I can give you some suggestions or praise the aspects that are already working in there. And yeah, we'll dig deeper into this, and I'll give you also some more practical suggestions about this type of work. And we can also do a few more exercises in the second part. All right. Obviously, since we have still a bit of time, ask me if you have any questions or if it was something that was unclear about the tasks. Because if everything is clear, I think we can wrap it up.
All right. Is there any questions from anyone? If not, we're going to end this workshop.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, guys.
All right. So thank you so much, Davide, for today's workshop. It has been a thought-provoking and insightful workshop. Hopefully this workshop will help everyone to gain more knowledge and your perspective on film criticism. Thank you also to all the participants for your enthusiasm in this workshop. Before we end this class, I would also like to remind the second day selected participants that the workshop will be held tomorrow from 2 to 6 p.m. Western Indonesian time with the link that we already sent via email. Thank you for joining us today. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Have a good day. Ciao, ciao.